Chapter 4. Everyone Else. I don't think people really believe most of the lies they're told. They accept them, because it's easier than trying to disprove them. William Stevenson. The Nature of Skyfall Events. Boaz Island, Bermuda, October 31st, 1988. Casey, the bartender, bit into a strip of duct tape and then tore it from the roll. He used it to secure a loose edge of a sign on the register, a piece of paper, yellowed with age, and curling in on itself. In barely legible marker, it read, "For key to restroom, ask at gas station next door." The sign was the most well-maintained object in the entire bar. The deteriorating door creaked open, and the bartender lazily glanced up. 3 patrons continued to drink as Jones slipped inside. Razor-blade bald, he dressed like most Caribbean tourists. Instead of a guidebook, he carried with him a copy of Frankenstein. He approached the counter and slammed the book down. The impact reverberated through the room, drawing everyone's attention. The cover flopped open, revealing an inscription in bright red ink. "Reap what you sow." "Geez, man!" Casey jumped back from the counter, hands over his ears. "You scared the piss out of me." "You're hungover." Jones ran a hand over his head and let out a sigh. Casey's bloodshot eyes drooped. "Only until I get drunk." "That doesn't solve the problem." Jones presented a red berry and travel-sized tube of toothpaste, then placed them on the bar. "But I'll make you a deal." He slapped his hands on the counter. The impact rattled the hinges of the cupboards behind the bar. "Oh, shit! My head!" Casey covered his ears for a moment. Yes, let's make a deal." Jones nudged the berry forward. "Get 2 beers and a lemon." Casey had collected the items and sampled the offerings. He flicked his tongue over his lips and around his mouth. It wasn't numb, like at the dentist. It felt normal, maybe a little minty. Jones sliced the lemon open and squeezed a single drop into one mug. "The berry will prevent you from tasting anything bitter or sour. The toothpaste will prevent you from tasting anything sweet." A crooked smile crossed his lips. "Now, close your eyes. Tell me which one has the lemon drop. Don't taste. You can't. Feel it. Feel the acid sizzle on your tongue. Get it right. I won't be loud." Casey bobbled his head and shut his eyes. Glass mugs slid across the wooden counter. He opened his eyes and took the first sip. The ethanol burned. "Be certain," Jones said. Casey nodded and took a sip from the second glass. There didn't seem to be much difference. "Why are we doing this?" "The best poisons are odorless and tasteless, but still acidic or basic." Jones tapped his finger on the lemon. "You won't know it's in your drink unless you feel it, like something trying to fry an egg on your tongue. Take another sip of each." Casey raised the glass again, and the beer rushed into his mouth. "Don't swallow," Jones said. "Roll it around." As instructed, Casey held the liquid in his mouth, swallowed, and tried with the other. This time, it was there. The smallest tingling sensation over his tongue. He gulped the beer down and opened his eyes. "The second one?" "Good. Now let's try it again with actual poison." Jones reached into his pocket. "Hell no!" Casey's head jolted forward, only to see his colleague pull out a packet of cigarettes and lighter. "Not cool, dude! I thought you were serious!" Jones tapped the unlit cigarette against his head to adjust its placement between his fingers. "I am. But what good would it do to try something like that when you're watching? No, you should be vigilant about everything, because one day I'll poison you, so be ready." A flame flickered from the lighter, and he puffed into the filter until smoke rolled out of his mouth. "Taste everything with caution." Casey's eyes shifted from the mugs to Jones and back again. I still don't know if you're serious. Have I ever not been serious with you? Piss! Casey leaned back and rested his head on the wall. I'll be afraid of everything now. Jones beamed for a moment and returned to smoking. Did you notice 2 of your customers are carrying guns? He shifted the lighter on the counter, using it as a mirror. How can you tell? Casey bobbed his head from side to side. 3 men drank quietly, spread throughout the bar. A Slavic man with graying hair, a man who'd spoken with a Spanish accent, and a shirtless redhead with a sunburn to match. You think these games are just to give you a hard time? I'm teaching you. Jones leaned in. Both men are dressed too warm for the climate. Jackets? Look at the way they hang, noticeably lopsided. A camera big enough to do that would stand out more. He pushed his lighter off the counter and gestured for the bartender to pick it up. Look at the shape while you fetch that. Casey knelt so he could get a better angle at the bulky weight in the Spaniard's jacket. It looked like a gun. Or maybe it looked like a gun because Jones said it was? He picked up the lighter and handed it back. How do you even know to check for that? You're in the CIA now. Assume everyone has a gun until proven otherwise. Assume they want to kill or take something from you. He spoke slower and emphasized each word. Assume the world is dangerous. But they might just own guns. You know, people own guns. Casey reached down and flipped the safety off the pistol under the counter. Jones removed several photographs from the back of his book. 3 men arrived at the airport this morning. He jerked his head toward Gray Hair and the Spaniard. They matched 2 of the men in the pictures. They had almost no luggage. Think. He paused. If they came by plane, they didn't bring their guns with them. Casey's voice became a sharp whine. This is not what I was promised. They said I could just drink and party. That's what they said. All I had to do was wear the recorder and submit the tapes. Simple. Now you're trying to poison me, and these dudes... He gestured to the armed men. Jones wagged his finger. Shut your mouth. You're getting too loud. He pointed behind the bartender. Go tell Alice a low tide storm's coming. Casey nodded, sloppily, his bloodshot eyes unblinking as they darted back and forth. He stumbled over a stool as he headed towards the back room. He recognized the code phrase. It gave Alice permission to kill. The kitchen swirled with the stench of unsalted cooked beef and freshly cut pineapple. A svelte blonde woman with narrow eyebrows wielded a thin, sharp blade. Alice Taylor extracted the core from an apple with incredible precision. Casey was certain that was not the skill she was practicing. She ran her tongue along the blade, collecting every drop of juice on her dark pink tongue. Low tide storm's coming? Casey's left hand trembled, the same as it had after his first skydive. He swallowed hard. The CIA had recruited Casey specifically because he had so many close friends considered high-priority targets. He joined because they promised him a paycheck to hang out with his friends and get drunk. He never imagined he would be in real danger, that he would need any of his training. It sounded so simple. Just keep doing what you're doing and carry this recorder. Now, his pulse throbbed in his gums. He wanted to stay in this back room, wait until Jones and Taylor resolved the situation, but his trainer would never let that happen. Alice cocked her head to one side and glazed her toothy smile with her tongue as she approached. She pressed the dull side of the knife into Casey's neck as her other hand caressed his cheek. She whispered, "Easy, baby. If you don't relax, you'll give us away." She rolled the blade flat against his neck. The cold steel stuck to his skin. The weapon pulled away, but Alice's other hand stayed. She stroked it over his neck, across his chest, and down his arm to his bracelet. She slipped one slender finger under it. "Look at the bright side. If it goes badly, you get to go here." She let go and disappeared out the door. Casey exhaled hard when she stopped touching him. He tried to slow his breathing and glanced down at his hemp-embroidered bracelet. It read, "Heaven is a half-pipe." As he turned, Taylor rushed back in the room, the seduction and tease gone from her voice. "I'll take the West." She pulled open a drawer and removed her pistol and clip, gracefully combining the two. In between deep, gasping breaths, Casey responded, "I'm not ready. He held up his shaking hand for Taylor to see. She pouted her red lips at him. "Oh, poor baby." She slapped Casey hard across the face. His cheeks stung, and it felt like his brain had been hit with a hammer, his hangover amplifying the pain. He closed his eyes tight and massaged his temple. A sharp sting bit into his right shoulder. He jerked away from Alice, who held a half-empty syringe. "What the hell?" She smiled her favorite devious grin and chuckled. "We know you're always hungover, so we planned ahead." Instinctively, Casey examined his shoulder. "What'd you put in me?" "Just a little something to help you focus." She winked at him and returned the syringe to one of the drawers. The chemical surged through his veins. The hangover eased, and his lethargy was forced out of his body. It was a sensation Casey had experienced before, in college. A friend hosted a party for a group of Russian models. As things died down around 4 a.m., the 6 of them headed upstairs. His friend had laid out the substance in several white lines over a glass coffee table. Casey's stomach turned, and his mind recalled stories of people doing terrible things to satisfy their addiction. He leaned back and glanced at the door. The beautiful Russian brunette cuddled up to him, pulled away, as though she could sense his hesitation. She had been one of the most beautiful women Casey had ever seen, and the subtle rejection was a sufficient motivator. He pressed his face against the glass and snorted the white powder. Casey hissed at Alice. "Cocaine?" "Just a little. Now get back out there, and remember, if you can't shoot straight, just shoot a lot." She gave him a slight push toward the door. His pulse drummed in his ears as he stepped out of the kitchen and into the bar. The room was quiet, calm. Even Jones was relaxed. He stepped over to the counter and checked the ammo in the revolver. "She gave me—" The entrance door of the bar slammed open. Outlined in the bright light of the afternoon sun stood a man in a white suit with dark skin, South American features, and jet-black hair pulled tight into a ponytail. He huffed audibly through a cigar in his mouth while working a lighter repeatedly without results. His sandals clapped at his heels with each step. Sand gritted against the wooden floors. "Everything he does is loud," Casey thought. As the man approached, he looked like the third member from the surveillance pictures. The man in the white suit slapped Jones on the back. "You have a light, my friend?" As he spoke, he rolled his R aggressively, almost like a growl. Jones fished a lighter from his pocket, and the dark-haired man sat beside him at the bar. Coarse black hair protruded from the sleeves of the thin fabric. He puffed on his cigar as the flame from the lighter blazed under it. "So, where are you from?" Jones pulled a picture from his book and placed it on the bar. He pointed at the faces of the 3 men. "Let's not play games. You know who I am, and you've been looking for me since this morning." The easy, confident smile disappeared from the dark-haired man's face. He set his cigar down on the counter. "I should have expected that." His accent was still heavy, but fading. "Would you like to know why?" Jones gestured for Casey to get him a drink. "What makes you think I don't?" The man opened his mouth, but paused. Whatever speech he'd prepared hadn't anticipated that answer. He looked down and rolled the cigar on the wood with his finger, then picked it up. "When I was a boy, you came to our home, came with your American money, and offered ridiculous amounts to my father. So much he couldn't refuse. He tapped ash into Jones's beer. I didn't see my father for a month. When he returned, he was a skeleton. The man's mouth frowned, and his nose crinkled. He drank so much water, he vomited and collapsed into his bed. He laid there for weeks. We were wealthy, but he was never the same. He drew a gun and pressed the tip into Jones's side. Oh, shit! Casey backed away from the counter. If you wanted to kill me, you would have done it. That gun's just a prop. Jones took a long drag and blew the smoke into the air. So, what is it you want? The door to the kitchen creaked open, and for a moment, everyone looked up. Alice emerged with a plate of fajitas steaming in her hand. She stalled at the door until people turned their attention back to the man with the gun. Alice tossed the plate aside and raised her pistol. Before the dish hit the ground, she'd put 2 rounds in the chest of the Spaniard and another one in Gray. The porcelain shattered, spilling thick, sweet sauce onto the wood grain. The dark-haired man whirled at the sound, and Jones slammed his elbow into the man's face. He toppled out of his chair to the floor. Jones leapt on top of him. The pistol clunked across the floor, and Jones gripped one hand around the man's throat. If you resist, Alice will put a bullet in you. In the corner, a glass rolled around on a table, then fell to the floor, causing the redhead to flinch. Alice dashed across the room and leveled her gun at him. What do you want to do with this guy? In the dim hotel room, shagged trimmed lamps from the 1960s cast distorted shadows on the walls, intended to mimic hallucinations. In the corners, splotches of black mold clustered, eating away at peeling wallpaper. Jones crinkled his nose at the odor. The air conditioner rumbled, stirring up various mildewed scents. He looked from his book to examine the man strapped to the chair with duct tape. I know you're awake. Your breathing's changed. Jones stared at the man's chest. It stopped moving as the captive tried to hold his breath. Have it your way. Jones stood from the bed and punched the man in the face. The man in the white suit groaned loudly. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Good. Let's try to be honest from this point on. Jones grabbed a passport from the nightstand. Alvaro Gomez, he read. That your real name? The duct tape squeaked as the dark-haired man adjusted himself. Alvaro, yes. My name... A bright light spread through the room as the door opened and Taylor entered. She discarded the apron and carried a tray filled with a variety of food. The prime rib glistened. Fruits were sliced open and prepared in elaborate fashions. Chocolate and an assortment of white creamy substances. On the side, a syringe containing a clear liquid. Alice moved like a dancer through the room. As she glided past Alvaro, she teased his hair with her fingers, then stroked his cheek. Her voice rose to a high shrill. You're awake! She smiled and set the tray down. Jones selected a sliced strawberry. Is the bar clean? All taken care of. He ready? She gestured to Alvaro. Jones pulled the syringe off the tray. Do you know what dopamine is? He glanced at the man in the chair. It's a chemical in the brain that governs both pleasure and pain. The only difference between the two experiences is where it's released. There are no limits to how much dopamine the brain will release for pleasure. Our capacity is infinite. But pain? Jones squirted a small amount of liquid, clearing the bubbles from the solution. Pain is different. The brain stops producing once a certain level is reached. Alvaro's eyes widened, fixated on the syringe. You don't have to do this. I'll tell you anything. Just ask. I know, but do you have any idea how much time and effort it takes to disprove a lie? Jones arched one eyebrow. Days, weeks, longer than I want to bother. And if you lie, We have to come back and start all over again. We need to make sure you're motivated." Alvaro's rapid breathing filled the room. The tape squeaked as he fought the restraints around his wrists. Alice reached over and held his hand, patting it as though to comfort him. "Oh, honey, you need to worry less. What you really should be doing is thinking of something to leverage, so we don't kill you when we're done." She smiled wide and nodded. Jones opened a drawer and removed a cotton ball soaked in alcohol and applied it to Alvaro's arm. The fascinating thing about the connection between pain and pleasure is one can enhance the experience of the other. If a moment of incredible pleasure is interrupted by a spike of pain, it can be overwhelming, like nothing you've ever felt. "I don't know who sent us to the bar. I just met those two on the plane. Please." Alvaro twisted under the tape until it cut into his skin. Blood dripped on his pants. Jones nodded to Alice. She approached the captive, moistening her lips with her tongue. Then she leaned over him and kissed him full on the mouth, deep and long. When she pulled away, Alvaro looked from Jones to her, his mouth gawking open. She pressed a single finger to his lips. "Shh. He's not done talking. The problem we encountered is the pain is too much, and people pass out. So we came up with a solution." Jones thrust the needle into Alvaro's arm and compressed the plunger. Alvaro started to weep, his head crumpled to his chest, repeating, "Please." Now, you might think the beautiful Alice is some kind of temptress, but you would be wrong. No, there is too much fear and torture for that to work. The effective method is food. Jones gestured to the tray. Alvaro didn't look up. He continued his single plea, but had switched to Spanish. "Por favor." When you eat, you will experience pleasure. And the great thing about hunger is, the longer you wait, the more you enjoy eating. Then we will begin. Jones selected a pineapple from the tray and bit into it. Some people try to starve themselves, but I've personally never seen anyone succeed. Hunger is just too strong a desire. Jones picked up the cigarette resting on the ashtray. "He's all yours." Alice held a razor blade at eye level. "I can't promise it will be fun, but it will be memorable." She placed it on her tongue, then straddled Alvaro and kissed him with her open mouth. As he stepped outside, Jones heard the man whimpering. Casey leaned against the plastic white railing along the second floor of the hotel. He stared down at his feet. "What are you doing?" Jones asked. "Nothing," Casey replied. "I can see that. It's a problem. You look suspicious just loitering outside the room." He extended his cigarette to Casey. "It's why I keep telling you to start smoking or at least carry a book with you." The shirtless surfer waved a refusing hand. "I'm good." "The hell you are. You don't have to smoke it. Just hold it." Jones pressed the cigarette into his colleague's hand. "All looks the same from a distance." Casey sluggishly adjusted it to extend between his fingers. On the street below, a battered, rusted sedan rolled into the parking lot. "You seem a little off. Still coming down from the high?" Jones puffed smoke into the air. Casey replied with a flat, detached tone. "Yeah, I never thought it would be like this." "You knew it was part of the deal. We cover the cost of your parties, let you surf, and you, in turn, record everything. And on occasion, there might be some shooting." Jones took another drag. "I guess." Casey shrugged his shoulders. "Maybe it's not worth it," Jones said. "What would you do to live the life you have now? Anything?" The surfer nodded. "Anything. Just got to get used to it, I suppose." He rubbed his ear. "I won't have to do that, will I?" He glanced at the door. "Do what?" Jones looked back. "Oh, she's just having fun. She's not going to actually torture him. We don't do that." "But I heard what you said," Casey replied. Didn't you read your Kubark? Jones could see the blank expression on his colleague's face. What do the new recruits call it again? The Black Ops Bible, the Assassin's Creed, the Torturer's Cookbook? Oh, yeah, I was supposed to read that. Anyway, back in the 60s, we learned that physical torture doesn't work. Pain stimulates an instinct to resist, but psychological torture interferes with people's ability to lie. So, she won't hurt him? Casey asked. Not on purpose. The rusted car's engine stopped, and the door opened. Trevor Benson emerged in an Egyptian cotton shirt. He spread his arms and smiled wide. Mephistopheles! The cigarette tumbled from Jones's fingers. He squinted as the sunset reflected off the windshield and ocean. Costly? Trevor folded his sunglasses, hooking them on his loose white-buttoned shirt. He glanced at the cigarette in Casey's hands. I see he's corrupting the youth, as always. Jones dashed down the stairs and greeted his friend with a hug. What are you doing here? Costly pulled 3 airline tickets from his pocket, along with several papers. There's been a Skyfall event in Portugal. He handed the papers over. Silas, Nichols, and Stevenson are already on their way, if they haven't arrived already. Casey ambled his way towards the other men, his low-riding shorts slipping down and in need of constant adjusting. What's in Portugal? If they've arrived, why didn't we hear about it sooner? Jones skimmed the brief. I called. Got no answer at the bar, Costly said. Jones's head jerked toward the hotel room. Damn, we were dealing with a situation. He stroked his chin. The first Skyfall event in over 10 years, and he shows up today, so we don't get the call. It's bigger than that, Jones, Costly said. I couldn't catch a flight down for almost an entire day. They all claimed to be booked solid. Jones tossed his cigarette to the ground and looked at the door to the hotel with Alvaro inside. Someone sent that man to distract us. Someone who knew this would happen. Shit! You think someone else solved it first?